Welcome. My name is Marla Kim Benziger. I am a member of this church and of the League of Women Voters, for me, of Deerfield. And I would like to thank the Social Action Committee of North Shore Unitarian Church for sponsoring this event. On behalf of all 4 leagues, which would be Deerfield, Highland Park, Highwood, Glenview, Genco, and Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, we thank you for coming. We are pleased to be able to present these debates and give you an opportunity to hear your candidates. Please be sure that your cell phones are off. Thank you. For those who may not know, the League of Women Voters is a national organization with 800 local and state chapters. The League is a political but nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. That means the League does not endorse or support any candidate or political party. Our mission is to educate voters and involve them in political process and government. Membership in the League is open to both men, did you hear that, men, and women. We offer a variety of activities throughout the year: voter registration, candidates debates, public programs and issues, legislative interviews, and discussion groups. If you are interested in government at any level, in public policy, or being engaged in the political process, please think about joining us. There are, of course, membership brochures outside. Before we start today's event, I want to thank, I'm going to murder his name, Shahaz Media, which is videotaping the debates and will schedule the video on channel 17 or 19 in Lake Forest, and will be posted on YouTube for everyone to see. Now let me introduce our moderator and League member, I'm going to murder her last name, Valerie Krejci. League policy state moderators must come from outside the voting district. Valerie is a professor at Oakton Community College and a professional cartographer. Say that for me. Cartographer. Can you tell I'm a little nervous? She served on the board of the League of Women Voters of Illinois. Valerie will explain the rules and guide the debates. Welcome, Valerie.
Thank you. Okay, here we go, the rules of the game, folks. Our candidates are seated in ballot order. Mr. Broad is going to be first, and then Ms. O'Connor. They have 1.5 minutes to make their opening remarks, and then they will have 1.5 minutes to respond to the questions. This is sort of standard League format to keep it from getting too rowdy. So this is the way we run things here. So you will have an opportunity as the audience to submit your questions, and we have a group of League members who kind of screen them to make sure you're being polite, that we don't have duplicates, that we don't have anything that doesn't pertain to this office, that kind of thing. And then they feed me the questions, and I read the questions to the candidates. After we get through whatever we can get through in the time allotted, the candidates will have a 1.5 minute closing statement. And then we'll start the forum for the next office. So today, for this one, we have until 2:55. I think 2:45 is when we go to the closing statements, so we'll see what we can get in. I have timers up here, up front, and they will put their little flag up and to let you know when you're running out of time, and I'll cut you off politely. If you run on too long, I'll just, overtalk you. Okay, so let's get going. First of all, Adam Broad, you have 1.5 minutes for your opening statement. Welcome.
Check. Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here. I want to thank you all for being engaged in this process. My name's Adam Broad. I'm current Vernon Township trustee. My background is decades of scholarship in humanities and social science, business, and I am an elected and successful political reformer. We're honored to be your Lake County Clerk.
Thank you. Okay, Robin O'Connor, your turn.
Hello, my name is Robin O'Connor, and I am thrilled to be here today. I bring a wealth of experience in service and management to the position of Lake County Clerk. My background provides me the ability to view things with varied perspectives. I was elected for 3 terms as a Libertyville Township trustee. Currently, I am the member of a Libertyville Sunrise Rotary and a key organizer for Libertyville Days, an important community fundraiser. A 35-year Lake County resident, my energy is boundless. Raising 4 active children with my husband, Dennis, both of us have been involved with school, community, and church activities in addition to scouts, sports, and school fundraisers. I have both my master's and a specialist degree in administration. My doctorate is pending upon my dissertation completion. My positions have ranged from being a teacher, a specialist, an administrator, to a curriculum designer. I am also an accomplished speaker and presenter. I have taught all ages as well as college age and adults, and currently I am teaching part-time at Northwestern University.
Thank you. We're off to the races. It's good. All right, now I forgot to mention we're going to take turns. So that means for the first question, Ms. O'Connor will go first. And this is your first question to both of you. As head of a large office, what philosophy or approach to management would you bring to your job? What particular problem, if any, do you observe in the office regarding management?
Many people think that the clerk is responsible basically for election, but her or him election responsibility is approximately about 25% of the position. The rest of the position is responsible for the management of an office, which is approximately 30 employees, access information and services related to vital services, birth, marriage, and death, but also the clerk is responsible for the office umbrella of the tax redemption process. The office is also responsible for a statement of economic interest. It is important that the clerk is a top manager, someone who is familiar with different management styles and is able to be flexible and adapt to the needs of the office.
Thank you. Mr. Broad.
As a volunteer legal assistant with the election protection team, I've been working in some of the trouble spots in Lake County. I know it doesn't affect the affluent residents of the county, but it is a problem, and I find it unacceptable. We need better training for our judges. We need more judges. We need to improve accessibility and participation in elections. I know it's only a percentage of the duties the clerk does, but it's the most important duty. It's essential to our democracy, and I'm ready to take on those challenges. As for the other administrative tasks, I've done all of those successfully in many other contexts, and I look forward to doing the same.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm going to go on to number 2, but first I've got a reminder that if you have a question that you have written on one of these cards and you want to have them, just put your hand up and somebody will pick this up. There should be people in the audience for that. Okay, question number 2 goes first to Mr. Broad. What precautions will you take to safeguard our county's election system?
A standing question. I don't know that we could do it in a minute and a half, but I think Robin and I both agree that we need to improve the technological infrastructure. And I think I've received a lot of blowback for this suggestion, but I do believe that the voter should be able to have a receipt whereby they can verify that their vote was counted and tabulated in the way they voted. Some people think the status quo is good enough. I don't. I think since we need the new technological infrastructure, we ought to put it in a way that allows the voters to do that. Sure, an honest and diligent clerk might be able to do that for the voters, but the voters should be able to do that for themselves. In the last election, we saw candidates in both parties, or we should say we saw partisans in both parties, showing a great cynicism in the integrity of our electoral system. We cannot have a democracy without faith in the integrity of our electoral system. So I think the citizens need to have absolute confidence in that integrity, and I think the reforms I want to put in will assure that integrity and give confidence to the voters, increase participation as well.
That's good. You got a lot of time when it says 30 seconds. Ms. O'Connor, your response to this question.
Yesterday, I attended an election judge training, which did open my eyes to a lot of interesting facts and figures. One of the facts that I found out is that there's 1,700 election judges for the coming up election for the primary. And it was also discussed about cybersecurity. I found out yesterday that there are two systems in place. You have a technology base that's for the election and a technology base that's for voter registration. They do not cross. So that's good news. What I'd like to do is continue to be proactive with cybersecurity technology and to be cutting edge. We are the third largest county, and we need to be cutting edge with our technology and our advancements and our protection. With having that many judges and that big of a county, you can see the importance of how our technology needs to be advanced, and you need a smart, savvy administrator who makes sure that this is being done.
Thank you. Okay, now you get the first crack at this next question, number 3. You kind of hinted on this, and it's really both, I got 2 cards that say almost the same thing. So what are your plans to improve the clerk's office regarding vital records, elections administration, and property tax extensions? And another one here says, do you anticipate permitting the public to use the online system for all functions, including campaign filings? Let's take them one at a time. I goofed up. Let's go with one. What are your plans to improve the clerk's office regarding vital records, elections administration, and property tax extensions?
One of the interesting things about the Lake County office is that the 3 offices, the clerk, the circuit clerk, and the recorder of deeds, are all working in the taxing structure. It is important that these 3 offices are aligned, and with our current technology and the advancement that we can foresee in the future, it needs to be a seamless and streaming procedure. Just the fact that the county clerk is working with tax redemption, the redemption process, you can see how the flow of taxes must be aligned between the 3 offices. My job as Lake County Clerk is to facilitate that streaming and efficiency of the office, not only with the taxing, but with all services.
Thank you. Mr. Broad, same question.
Yeah, wow, alignment. Maybe we should take it to the shop, huh? Well, I'll tell you one thing I wouldn't do. It's what they did in the current administration, where apparently they've spent millions of dollars to not digitize the records. How about this? No fancy talk. So high school interns and some free shareware, those records could be digitized, okay? Done. It's ridiculous that the records aren't digitized yet. I'm a hands-on guy, and I'm a results-oriented person, and I have in my campaign, I don't only have a minute here, but I can produce these results. I've done it in the past, and it's a hands-on process, and like I said, I just gave you one practical example that you don't spend millions of dollars to not get the job done. It's just unacceptable.
Well, you're going to really like the next question then, which I already read. You get it first. What computer system does the office currently use, and do you anticipate permitting the public the use of an online system for all functions, including campaign filings?
I'm not aware of the current infrastructure. I just know that the website is Byzantine. And so if you're looking for information, or if you're not a political insider, you're a citizen activist and you want to be a candidate, good luck figuring that out by yourself, the way the website is set up. So that needs to be changed. I'm sorry, repeat the other point.
The next question's on the website. Never mind. What computer system does the office currently use in permitting the public the use of an online system for all functions, including campaign filing?
Transparency is key to political reform. Transparency and accountability. As your running township trustee, that's how we expanded social services and reduced the property tax levy 5%. Is we instituted a program of transparency, and that's where you're going to find the waste and the better practices when we can reallocate the funds for any proposed reforms I have. I don't want to come to the taxpayers and say I need more money for all these bright ideas. There's plenty of money in government. It needs to be better managed. I have proven results at managing public funds in a responsible way to improve services and cut costs. I've done it.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. O'Connor.
I am aware that they are transforming to a new system to align the three offices, I believe, in the taxation. But to be honest, I don't know the exact system that they are using. That is something that I will be educated in, definitely. But I wanted to speak a little bit to my background in business management so that you understand where I'm coming from. I do have a master's in administration, and it is in education, but I want to let you know that it's similar aligned to an MBA. And I also have completed another administration degree that will give me a doctorate in administration and education. But I wanted to let you know that that degree allows me to be a superintendent of any size school. So with that knowledge, you understand that I have a very strong background in management. And in today's world, management includes fiscal responsibility and transparency and being able to connect all of the dots. So with that said, technology is a very important piece of the Lake County Clerk's office. And I know that I will look into that and work hard.
Thank you. All right, you get first crack at this next question, number 5. If you were elected, what is your plan for staffing the office?
Oh, interesting. Interesting question, because when I was at the judge training, I met some of the staff that has been working in that office for many years, and many of my encounters with them were very positive. So I really believe that my first step is to get to know the system and to understand the employees and develop a trusting relation so that we can move forward to give the citizens of Lake County the very, very best. If that means that we need to create new guidelines and we need to create different types of positions, that will be done. I have done that in the past under my administration and have done that successfully.
Thank you. Mr. Broad?
Again, staffing speaks to the issue of accountability, and it's a two-way street. I would have to be accountable to my staff as they are to me, and I guess we're looking for basic competence. You know, when you see judges not following the legal procedure, as I've seen, it was just one incident, but it was one incident in front of a voter protection legal assistant. So lots of judges, but I don't know why a judge who doesn't know the election law and isn't executing their duties properly isn't replaced on the spot. One way to improve judges is, I think, they have more accessibility by having different shifts. We have one size fits all. So I think we could have more people involved in the process and be easier to replace someone or retrain someone that doesn't know what they're doing by having a morning shift, an evening shift, a swing shift, something like that. I've done a lot of hiring and firing in my work, and I guess I would maintain a standard of integrity in doing that, and it would be results-based. I mean, are they doing their job? You know, and when someone isn't doing their job, you do what you can to get them up to speed, and if they don't get up to speed, you have to remove them.
Thank you. This question 6 is almost take off on that one, I think, as much as I know about this area. So you get it first crack. What are your thoughts about the process that caused the great delay in the case of Scott Drury? How would you handle that in the clerk's office, ballot creation and testing the equipment, et cetera?
I'm sorry, who goes first?
Adam.
Yeah, that's a tough one, I tell you.
I'm just reading them, remember?
Again, I think this also speaks to why I want to increase early voting, is because when you push the start time up forward, if you have these discrepancies, you don't mess up the whole process by having these weird glitches or discrepancies, and they can be resolved before the election day. What happens if this thing drags on to March 20th? Then what do we do? I don't know. You tell me. So yeah, there's. I think this one goes over the clerk's head. I think this problem is a statewide mishigash.
Ms. O'Connor.
Yes, definitely. One of the things that I noticed when I was at the training yesterday was the procedure of how the election process is very step-by-step organization. And one of the things that was interesting was that that particular office, the people that have worked there for many years, have a system for testing the equipment. Another comment was made that once citizens were allowed to register to vote on the day of voting, it has changed our whole dynamics of elections. You know, thousands of people, I believe it was 5,000, please don't quote me, but I think it was 5,000 individuals registered to vote within the Lake County system on that day. So you're looking at, again, another technological movement that we have to be on top of. And we have to try before we have to go through the steps and make sure that everything's working before the day begins.
Thanks. Okay, you're going to like this one. Question number 7 goes first to you, Ms. O'Connor. Maybe above your grade level, I don't know. The county board wants to cut the budget. Where would you cut the clerk's budget?
To be honest, I have to walk in the shoes of the county clerk to find out what system needs to be streamlined, what system needs to be made more efficient, and how we can alter employment system to better match the needs of the Lake County Clerk office. Going into an office and changing the dynamics is a big change, and so therefore one must comprehend the changes that need to happen and be mindful. Because if we want to change the system to generate less, so that we're not paying less, we've got to understand that system in and out so that we can make a meaningful change.
Thank you. Mr. Broad?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think here we have one of the largest economies in the United States, the state of Illinois. We have a massive economy, one of the richest states in the country, and we are broke. If you want a simple answer in a minute and a half, I'd say it was bipartisan corruption that got us into this mess, and we're going to need bipartisan reform to get us out. Locally, the problem starts at the board level, the Lake County Board. Just like some of my partisan friends in Cook County, they've been in too long, and some of them need to go. They are the problem. We need transparency and accountability in our government. We have such a wealthy state, and our money is getting wasted by entrenched political bureaucrats. In Vernon Township, when we started instituting accountability, we found the money we needed to improve our social services, and we were able to cut our property tax levy 5%. I intend to have some cuts in the clerk's budget, but not to fund the waste and corruption of the board. I want to have my reforms in place, and I need to get a hold of the receipts. I need to look at the procurement process. All that stuff needs to be apparent to the voters, not just to me. You all need to be able to know how your money is being spent and what the process is for selecting vendors, who's getting the money, every receipt.
He took that very well. That stopped someone else talking. All right, you're going to like this next one then, which goes first to Mr. Broad. How will you handle absentee ballots to make sure they are valid? First you, yes.
I'm not sure I understand the question. I mean, do you mean to verify that they're accurate?
Yeah, I'm just reading this on the question. It sounds like it's almost a continuation of what you're answering.
Well, okay. Well, I can tell you this. When I ran a voter registration program, we registered over 19,000 voters. We did have quality control. So we did, every third name on the list, we actually would double check. Go to the address, see if it was for real. That'd be an easy system if there was a system in place. I mean, I would look at what's in place right now for that, but I'm more of a fan of participatory voting, but yeah, I think we can do quality control like we did in the voter registration program where we're checking every third name or just random checks and just making sure. And then, of course, seriously prosecuting any attempt to conduct voter fraud. I mean, it's sort of an open secret that stuff goes on in our state here and there, and it should be absolutely crushed by legal means.
Okay, thank you. Ms. O'Connor, your attempt at this question.
Protocol needs to be followed. The bottom line is when there is a protocol for absentee balloting, it should be followed, it should be checked and rechecked. Snowbirds, as they're often called, are a huge population that does absentee voting and are very responsible in their voting. So you have a lot different pockets of population that are using absentee voting, which is a good thing. So again, absentee voting protocols need to be checked and rechecked and followed.
Okay, thank you. Now, we're just moving right along. So you get question number 9. Ms. O'Connor, you first crack at this. What are your plans for recruiting new judges and retaining them?
As the Lake County Clerk, I will follow protocol that is given to me through the Lake County office, and the responsibility of finding judges there is guidelines that must be followed, and as an example of the Lake County office, I will follow them.
Thank you. Mr. Broad.
I'm not entirely convinced the status quo is the best we can do. There are existing organizations out there, 501c3, nonprofit, nonpartisans, where there are really engaged, active citizens like all of you who took the time out to come here, and people like that can be engaged and brought into the process as judges, especially since it's so essential for the democratic system to have fair and transparent elections. It is a real blessing that I think we take for granted in this country, that we can remove an administration nonviolently through the ballot box. It is precious. We should not take it for granted. The federal government's planning to spend $1 trillion more, including on nuclear weapons, in the next 4 years. I don't understand why resources aren't directed more to the electoral system. This is the backbone of democracy. This process is the first line of defense and first line of offense for protecting and promoting our civil rights and securing the blessings of liberty.
Thank you. Wait, now, did I give you, that was, oops. I'm almost mixed up. Did you have a crack at that? No. Wait, number 9.
I did.
You did?
I did.
Sorry. When I get to 10 or so, I start getting mixed up with this either-or stuff. Okay, number 10 goes first to Mr. Broad. There are a lot of legal deadlines and processes that the clerk's office is responsible for. What is your background in law/legal process?
My education in law began at the Land of Lincoln Legal Assistance Foundation in 1988. It has continued through various civil rights organizations I've been in and as a voting rights activist. As far as deadlines, I have a background in campaign work. There's no deadline like an election day for a campaigner. So I know all about deadlines and getting it done on time because you don't get an extension. So, yeah, I think I can handle that. Another note, since I have a little bit of time, I've been told that there's really nothing spectacular about the clerk's office, so why is such a social justice community organizer guy like me interested in such a unspectacular job, and then at the same time I'm told it's somehow going to be over my head? I would like to know what it is exactly Carla does that I can't do. I don't see anything except, like I said, spending millions of dollars to not get the records digitized.
Okay, Ms. O'Connor, your turn.
I was very fortunate in both of my advanced degrees that I did take law classes, and so I'm very familiar with reading law and doing contracts. I was a grant writer in one of my positions, so I have tackled grants, which many of you know can be very interesting. And also, as a township trustee for 12 years, there were many instances that we needed to work with a lawyer on many situations involving our open space, and also we also have about $100,000 that we give for nonprofit grants. There are many areas that I have worked with lawyers, and I'm very comfortable working with lawyers and working with the law.
Thank you. Okay, question 11, last one I got on my pile here, goes first to Ms. O'Connor. Can you comment on the clerk's website and its effectiveness in communicating important information to citizens?
Well, that's another thing I like to do. I'm one of these people that like to dabble in everything, so I do like to make websites, and I'm often the person that I'm the one that they give these tasks to. So I do look at the website with a critical eye, and I do believe that it can be modernized. I think there could be more transparency involved. I like the setup with the questions, but when you enter the site, you really have to know your task before you seek, and I think there could be a more, what I call, friendly way to address citizens' questions and concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Broad.
Yeah,
You have an opinion on this.
I think I already said what I had to say about the website. I think Byzantine is the word I used. There's always details with procurement, so it has to be a transparent process, and I would love to partner with the community to find out their concerns in addition to my own. And as far as web designers, I mean, I'm sure we'll find one to get it done. There's a lot of them out there. Well, I'm confident low-hanging fruit.
Okay. You've done such a spectacular job, you two, that you whipped through all these questions, and I have no more on my pile. So now you're going to have your 1.5 minutes to make a summary statement, and we'll be done a little early. So let me think. I have to go the opposite of how we started. So we went 1-2, so now we'll go 1-2. I know. So that means Ms. O'Connor can go first.
First of all, I want to tell you that this is a wow moment for me to be here. And I really mean that. So when I look at you, I want you to understand that when I say wow, I truly mean it. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. As a public servant for over 30 years, I welcome another opportunity to serve the citizens of Lake County. I strongly feel that my presence here today sets an example to others that the democratic process to serve is attainable. I am living proof of that. I went to the train station. I talked to so many people to get signatures. I also want you to know that I hope my presence here will empower other women of all ages to step forward and make a difference. And I thank you with all of my heart for allowing me to be here.
Thank you. Mr. Broad.
Yeah, I too am a little overwhelmed being through the looking glass and being a candidate at a League of Women Voters event. It's sort of, I think it would have to be some kind of political nerd to appreciate why someone like me would be really overwhelmed by this experience, but I see all of you are here, so perhaps you share that. As I said during my remarks, I've done it. Everything we need from our clerk, more voter registration, more access, cutting costs, improving services, expanding services in a fiscally responsible way. I've done all these things. So that's, I think, what qualifies me for it in my past work, and I look forward to using those same reform principles to bring better government into the Lake County Clerk's office. I would be honored to have your vote, and not only to have your vote, but if you tell your friends to please vote for me, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. I want to remind the audience that you are living in a democracy and you need to participate and encourage your neighbors to participate, and don't take these off elections for granted, the primaries, not the big national. We need people to turn out and pay attention. I am now going to close this up, and we're going to take a break and change it up, and then at 2:55 we'll have the 10th Congressional District candidates. Thank you for coming and participating. Now we're going to reorganize for the 10th Congressional District Forum, and our three candidates that we have this afternoon, and they're here according to their ballot position. You're at the top: Jeremy Wines, Sapan Shah, and Douglas Bennett. All right, and we are going to follow the same rules that we did for the clerk's race that we had previously. I'm the moderator, Valerie Krejci. I'm from out of this district. I don't have a horse in this race. I don't live here. I will read the questions that are presented to me, and you all have an opportunity to submit your questions. There are people walking around with cards and pencils, and you are encouraged to write your questions on them. And they go back to a screening committee in the back, and we try to make sure they're not duplicates, no foul language, no goofy, unpertaining to this race or that kind of stuff. And then they'll feed them to me, I'll read them, and each candidate has a minute and a half to answer the questions. My timers are up front here with their signs and the stopwatch, so they have a minute and a half opening statement, responses to the questions, and a minute and a half closing statement. So those are our rules. I think we're pretty set. So we're going to start with Mr. Wines, and he has his 1.5 minute opening statement.
Great, thank you. First of all, thank you to all of you for coming, give us the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Jeremy Wines. I live in Highland Park with my wife Leslie and our 3 young kids, and I'm running for Congress because the challenges facing our country today and tomorrow are massive, and they cannot be met with the same old failed solutions of the past. Growing up here in Illinois, my parents worked extremely hard to give my brother and I a middle-class childhood, and they made sure that we worked hard too. I took out loans and worked my way through Illinois State University, becoming the first in my family to graduate with a 4-year degree before going on to earn a law degree from DePaul and spending the last professional life fighting to solve some of the biggest national security challenges that our country has faced. I think Leslie and I can relate to a lot of families in the district. Mom, we know what it's like to try to raise raise kids, parents in a district like this where it's not often easy. So we bring that to the table as well. And I'm running to give the next generation the same opportunities to move up that I had. Wondering if the American dream still applies to them. That's a failure by everyone in Washington, that they aren't coming close to solving our problems. In fact, I think they go out of their way to make things worse. Instead of explosive economic growth, we've seen our national debt explode. Instead of a booming economy creating winners and losers and providing opportunity to everybody, we've had a booming tax code creating winners and losers and shrinking opportunities. And too many people continue to let party politics dictate when our security and that of our allies at stake. So my priorities are explosive economic growth, opportunity for all, fight to hold the line on spending and balance the budget, and to be a leader on foreign policy from day one. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And now we have Mr. Shaw.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. I'm super excited to be here because it's not lost on me that my parents immigrated here just 40 years ago into this district in Waukegan where I was born, and it's such a great privilege to now be vying for the nomination to run for Congress in that same district. My name is Sapan Shah. I'm a physician and attorney from Libertyville. I'm running for Congress to bring real-world experience and common sense to Washington. And I really have this great idealism about America. I think that the American government in America works really, really well when people go in and out of the government, when they're not career entrenched politicians, but they're people that are citizens like you and me, and they go in and out, serve for a period of time, and leave. I also think that I have something great to offer right now. Our healthcare system is broken. Out-of-pocket costs are really high. Insurance premiums are going up. We need more physicians at the table. We need more business owners at the table. I can comment very relevantly about small businesses and job creation. I started my own business 10 years ago with the support of my wife. She paid the bills for several years. And we grew that business up over that 10-year period. I've invested in dozens more. That's the type of real-world experience that I would like to bring to this job if I'm elected. I'm the only person in this race that supports term limits, and that's a very clear offer. I'll bring that real-world experience for a prescribed period of time, and then I'll get out of the way for the next person. Thank you.
Thank you. And now it's Mr. Bennett's turn.
Thank you. Thank you for all coming here tonight, or this afternoon, to Deerfield. My name is Doug Bennett. I live in Deerfield down the road. I'm here with my wife, and we have 3 children. And I am a computer consultant that's worked with financial and inventory systems for the last 15 years. I've been working for 35 years. And I've worked at a lot of major firms that you know, so I've been consulting at dozens of places. I have real-world experience, and I've seen a lot of businesses that make things, that do things. I've seen a lot of good and bad times in my life. I've seen a lot of things personally. I've raised children. I've had one daughter go through school. I filled out FAFSA forms. One year, my company decided to go on Obamacare plans. I've been on the recipient of these things. There are things that we can fix. I have a set of skills. I came out here to go to Northwestern. I'm a mathematician. I have a lot of historical knowledge. I think I bring a different set of understandings to the table than my 2 friends here. I think we need to have people who can know what the effects of their changes are going to be, know what kind of incentives will drive what kind of behaviors to try and reduce the number of inadvertent, unintended consequences of the law we pass. And I'm here to ask for your vote and your support, and I hope you have a good set of questions and find out who we are and what we believe so that you have as much information as possible. Because I'm looking forward to this discussion, and I'm going to let it back to the moderator.
Thank you. All right. Now we're going to go to Dr. Shaw first because he gets the first question. And this is the only question I have at the moment. So bear with me. Please tell us your stance on gun control, particularly about I think it's AR-15 assault weapons.
Sure. So all of us are extremely upset with the tragedy that happened this past week. My approach to this issue is there's multiple things that we need to talk about. First, I think very clearly I support common sense gun restrictions, identity checks, background checks, closing gun show loopholes, those things. I think that the majority of Americans support those things. I support those things too. I also support the banning of bump fire, slide fire mechanisms, as well as part of the overall approach to our handling of this issue. In particular, I was dismayed to see that this potentially had 2 warning signs, if not more, of express threats that the FBI had received. So I think we need to work hard to enforce our current laws and also enforce and encourage coordination amongst all of our agencies and law enforcement, both at the federal and state level. And then lastly, I think a place where I can contribute in particular is in the mental health space. One of the companies that I invested in was a company that really delivered mental health services to underserved areas, and I think that that's a key element of this entire discussion and one that I would also like to improve.
Thank you. Douglas Bennett, your turn.
All right. I agree with Sapin that we're all saddened by the tragedy that happened in Florida, and we know that this happens too often. There were signs, and somebody at the FBI obviously missed something in their process, but I don't want to throw them under the bus. I know that the FBI down there probably does a lot of good work and that we don't see. We only see it when something goes wrong and something's missed. I'm a civil libertarian. I believe that we all have to protect all of our civil liberties. Then it's Second Amendment, that's First Amendment, that's Fourth Amendment, and I'm very loath to give up any of those liberties for temporary safety. And so I kind of come down that we know that we're going to have issues from time to time, but if we only protect our civil liberties when they're popular, we won't have civil liberties, we won't have what's popular. And sometimes we have to take positions that say we need to protect all of our rights. Now, I believe that the ATF made a mistake with the bump stocks. That's an automatic weapon. It should have been part of the automatic weapon rules. I think the administration could go out there today and administratively say, hey guys, fix this problem. Just get it done. I don't think we need new laws. I think we need to get people to do what they were supposed to do originally. So that's a problem. I think we have solutions. I do agree that there are mental health issues. Well, I guess we're going to stop, but I think there'll be more questions on this downstream.
I obviously agree with Sapin and Doug on how horrified it was to see what happened last week. So I grew up in a rural environment, universal gun ownership, supporter of the Second Amendment, but it's because of that, not in spite of it, that I think we need to really focus on some common sense gun control measures that can get bipartisan support and actually make their way through Congress. Universal background checks would be something that I would support. We can do a much better job of enforcing current gun laws on the books, in particular laws against straw purchasing. There should be federal legislation that makes straw purchasing and smuggling a federal offense in the way that it isn't now. Bump stocks, there's bipartisan legislation in Congress right now from a Republican and a Democrat to make those illegal, so that regulatory distinction between automatic and semi-automatic weapons can't be blurred. Also, in this particular case, I think there's something that we need to look at, and something along the lines of a gun violence temporary restraining order, something that all those signals that were missed by both federal law enforcement, so many folks who knew this young man, who were reporting things about him, and nothing was done. There needs to be a way to maintain due process for individuals, but at the same time, go to court. So somebody like this cannot get the weapons that he had to do what he did. So those are some new things I think we need to look at and hopefully can get bipartisan support and actually move and get something done on this issue. So thank you.
Okay, now here's the second question. It goes first to Douglas Bennett. Do you agree with the administration's plan for infrastructure? Do you have other suggestions?
Well, let me say that I do think that infrastructure in the United States is an important thing, and I know that we need to continue to maintain the roads and bridges and everything we have inside the country. So I support infrastructure in general. Obviously, this is a big bill with a lot of little things in it for different people. So I have to say that I have to research any given part of it more specifically. But in general, I think we need to make sure that we fund our infrastructure in a way that helps us here. I am concerned that a lot of the bill is about matching, and here in this state, we are not going to have money to match. So this bill is not going to help us as much as it does a lot of other states that are in a lot better financial situation. So it would be better if we got grants instead of matching money, because our state government has had a terrible time coming up with the money to match these kinds of bills. So I think a congressman from here has to go out and fight to make sure that, in spite of the fact that Springfield is damaged, and we all know it's damaged, that we still get our fair share of transportation improvements, and we don't have to sit and watch everybody else use our tax dollars without having that brought here. So I'll let...
Thank you. If you're giving it up before the stop sign, that's really good. Now, Jeremy Wines, you have another crack at this question.
Okay, great. So we've talked a lot about during this campaign for the last few months my plan for what I like to call explosive economic growth that can actually help us short-term and long-term. Tax cuts were a big part of that. The regulatory reforms, getting Washington off the backs of job creators here in the 10th district was a big part of that. Number three is infrastructure. I do think that the time is right for a 21st century infrastructure upgrade, the kind we haven't had in years, and so I like the outline of the plan that was put out by the administration. I like the idea of encouraging more private sector investment, because I think one of the big problems when it's purely done from the federal government, there's so many loopholes and so many restrictions, and it takes years and years before the shovel actually makes its way into the ground. I think the more locally it is done and the more private sector involvement you have, it's just going to be better, it's going to be less expensive, it's going to be more efficient. I think in this district we are an infrastructure hub here in Illinois, here in Lake County and in the 10th Congressional District. We would benefit from a 21st century infrastructure upgrade. We're going to have to spend a little bit, but we would benefit from it and see the massive returns from it because of the tremendous amounts of infrastructure, small businesses and large that work here, and just where we are geographically in this country as a place right in the middle where everything moves its way east to west, comes through this way. So I'm a big proponent of moving on infrastructure. It is long overdue.
Thanks. Sepp Shaw, you're number three on this.
Thank you. Infrastructure is absolutely important to our district. Just the other thing that hasn't been discussed, metro lines and other travel lines for us, whether they're highways or roads, it makes a big deal. Lake County, we have a lot of residents that also go into the city. But I had a great conversation a few days ago with somebody that talked to me about infrastructure. They analogized it to, ordering a great bottle of wine at dinner. And everybody enjoys the bottle of wine, talks about the bottle of wine, but at the end of the day, when the check comes due, nobody really wants to pick up the check. And the best thing that is in our current discussion about infrastructure are these public-private partnerships. It's about more private money coming forward. But we have to be careful about that, especially in the context of the budgets that we have right now. This year looks like it's going to be roughly $1 trillion deficit. So we have to be very, very careful about where the money is going to come on these things.
Thank you. Okay, now question number 3 goes first to Jeremy Wines. Trump's budget proposal cuts $1.6 trillion from Medicare and Medicaid. What is your position on this?
Great question. So first of all, another bipartisan problem that we have in this country is we take presidential budgets way too seriously, because what really matters is what Congress is going to do. I've watched this process for the last 10 years doing what I've done, involved in policy making, and presidents of both parties submit budgets that are basically dead on arrival, that are more political documents than anything about budgetary reality. That needs to come from Congress. So the idea of, I don't know about the specific dollar amount, but I do think it is reasonable, we need to be able to discuss entitlement reform in this country. I mean, the projections are unsustainable. If we don't do something to protect it, basically make it so we don't change it for those who are at or near retirement age, because they've been made promises, and those promises should not be yanked out from under them. But we do need to think about the next generation, and I sit here today with 3 kids under the age of 8, and it's hard to assume under the current models that those programs are going to be there for them, let alone Leslie and I. So I think there's a problem in this country where this is that third rail that we can't touch and speak about seriously and offer real solutions. So I think we do need to consider entitlement reforms that can keep the programs for those who are at or near retirement age and actually ensure that they're there for future generations, because every projection, government, third party, otherwise, suggests that they're not going to be if we don't do something about it.
Sepp Shaw.
Sure. I think that a lot of our discussion happens to be about cuts. What are we going to cut and how much are we going to cut? And we haven't talked about in healthcare how we can reduce utilization and improve cost effectiveness of our dollar. As somebody that's been in healthcare, I understand healthcare delivery. My business was at the intersection of providers and healthcare delivery. And there's some things we can do today that can improve our costs and reduce our utilization without affecting benefits. What are those? Number one, we should improve price transparency. We should allow for all outpatient care to be clearly demonstrated what the pricing is going to be before you consume it. If they did that, if we nudged in there and did that, there'd be plenty of innovators that would give us mobile apps so we could compete imaging the way we compete for airline prices to London or to New York. In addition, I think we need to really increase competition for insurance companies across state lines. If we do that, we can improve the premiums that patients pay independent of just the costs of health care. We don't have to cut benefits there. We need to improve the medical liability climate. If we improve the medical liability climate, we'll reduce defensive medicine, again, reduce utilization. Reducing utilization is a way to reduce our costs without reducing benefits. And those are 3 things that can be done today if we get the kind of people into Congress that understand how the healthcare system works.
Thank you. Now, Douglas Bennett, your turn.
No, thank you. I think I agree more with Jeremy than Sapin on this. I think that we have real issues about our entitlements, and we have to have some serious grown-up conversations and bring all the entitlements to the table and say, here's the money we have, here's what we have to fund them with, what are we really going to do? And the question was not only about Medicare, which is our promise to the elderly, but it's about Medicaid, which is the safety net for the poor. So it's not about, we made promises, it's about how do we manage this. And as much as I'd love to believe that Sapin can find ways that we can have more benefits for less money and magically the problem will go away, I'm very cynical. I've seen great things for free, big improvements for free for the last 30 years, and they don't really show up. And so I think that we really do need to have the conversation about what do we do about Social Security? Do we start raising the age because people are living longer? What do we do about Medicare? How do we bring down prices? And where do we go from there? Who qualifies for Medicaid? And that's a really hard conversation because these people need help. And we have to look at that and make some really hard decisions, and there'll be people on TV that we want to help. So I think Jeremy's right. I support talking about entitlement reform and trying to move forward. And this is not going to happen unless both parties have grown-ups come forward to the table and start putting down ways to move forward on this issue.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we're on to question number 4, and it goes first to Sapin Shaw. What is your position on DACA and the border wall?
Sure. We get this question a lot, and I've said many times that I feel that with respect to Dreamers in particular, which are minors that came to this country illegally, usually because of a guardian or somebody else, that we don't assign the same culpability to minors that we do to adults. And so I would support a permanent status for Dreamers immediately, and we connect it with strengthened border security. I don't think that necessarily needs to be physical infrastructure. The wall is the border is a very long border at our southwest border with Mexico, and it requires different different elements at different places, and technology can certainly be a big part of that. But DACA recipients currently should be given a permanent status because they don't have the same culpability of adults who arrived here illegally.
Thank you. I got mixed up now. All right, I gotta go.
Continually moving in there.
Yes, it's right. It's the same pattern, and now it's going to Douglas Bennett. Same question.
All right, so this is about DACA.
Correct.
Here's the thing I have about DACA. I don't think we can find a way to cut 1 million people out of the community of illegals and leave everybody else behind and still maintain our belief that families ought to be unified when people come to this country. And that's always been the sticking point about this. So in my view, that if we either solve the problem for everybody or we can't solve the problem, because at the end of the day, in the details, when we get downstream, we'll get to these spots where we're going to either give up family reunification, which we don't want to do, or will allow people who brought their children here to be rewarded, which we also don't really exactly want to do. So that's where that issue comes down, and I think if we don't go out and say, at the end of the day, we have to do this for everybody, we're not going to get anywhere. So as much as the DACA thing tugs at our heartstrings, I think that our answer has to be a much broader thing. And I think any answer that's going to get past the Congress is going to require enforcement of our border. As Americans, we get to choose who gets to be citizens and who doesn't. As a country, we get to choose that. That's a fine thing to do. That's not bad. So I support actually creating a situation where we're not going to continually have the same problem. But at this point, I think we need to have a broader solution than just these few people and then go home for the next 10 years. I don't think that helps us any.
Jeremy Wines, your chance at this question.
So I think most people in this room would probably agree with me that one of the big problems that we have in Washington, D.C. is that compromise has become a dirty word, and there's no bigger example of this than the immigration debate and what's happened the last few months on DACA. A functional Congress with more members of Congress from within the 40-yard lines in the middle of the American electorate than we have now would have gotten a compromise on this issue within a couple weeks after the Democratic leadership walked out of the White House after the president did what he did on DACA. Here's what I want to see. And it's pretty consistent with the president's outline. I would support a legislative package. I do think, where I disagree with Doug, we have to do this in stages. I would support a legislative package where those 1.8 million potential dreamers, which is above and beyond those who are currently registered as dreamers, are allowed to remain on a pathway to citizenship, to come out of the shadows and remain here as citizens in exchange for border security. This is the only way we're going to get something done on this issue. Both parties have to come to the table. The Democrats have talked positively about the need for enhanced border security funding. It doesn't have to be a wall along the 2,000-mile-long border. It will be in places. In other places, we can use technology. And in exchange for that, I think the Republicans here in Washington have made a good faith offer to go above and beyond what the previous administration did and allow 1.8 million dreamers to remain here. I don't want to see them go. I want them to remain. I want them to be citizens eventually. And in exchange for that, let's get some security done. This is obvious. This should have been done already.
Thank you. All right. Now, I think we're done with DACA. Number 4, yeah, we're done. Okay, put that one down. Number 5 goes first to Bennett. Yeah, is that right? Am I on?
Yep, you're right.
All right. I'd like to enlarge this question a little to campaign finance in general, but the question on the card says, have you received campaign donations from 1, fossil fuel companies, 2, the NRA, or 3, the Koch brothers? But go away. It's a problem to run for Congress and not be having a lot of money, as you all know. Let's address that.
And I know more than Sapid. The answer to those questions is no. I have not received money from those 3 organizations. But campaign finance is a difficult subject for a lot of people because people do have the right to try and get their voice heard, and as that's more and more expensive, it's hard for them to gather together and make that happen. So I kind of agree with free speech is protected, this is protected. And what we've done with campaign finance reform is we've made it sort of an incumbent protection system, and we've given advantages to people who have more money than less. Because groups of citizens can't get together as easily and help fund a candidate they deem worthy. And what it means is that people who have better connections or more money themselves, like Governor Rauner or J.B. Pritzker, for example, to pick two people, have an unlimited way to get their message out. And people like you can't get together a bunch of your friends and do the same thing. And so I am a free speech advocate. I think that's a civil liberty. And I think what we've done in the campaign finance arena has made it harder for worthy candidates to get through and made them more dependent on wealthy benefactors.
Thank you. Jeremy Wines.
Yeah, the answer is no. I haven't received, to my knowledge, any campaign contributions from those three interests. But I agree with Doug. The problem of campaign finance is much larger than that issue. And what I like to say when the issue of campaign finance comes up, the phrase we should all have in the back of our minds is the law of unintended consequences, because whenever Congress tries to address this issue or the state legislature tries to address this issue, there's always, money will always find a way, there's always a new loophole that's created, and there's always a new problem that we end up having to address. So 20 years ago, Congress passed a big campaign finance bill that really capped the amount of individual donations, and it capped the amount that parties could give. So what happened? You had highly ideological third-party groups form to go around the party system, and which has since divided us even more than the old system because it's about chasing hardcore ideological dollars. And you've created a system where somebody like me who cannot give my own campaign hundreds of thousands of dollars has to go out and raise it person by person. Now, thankfully, we've been able to do that because we have support from here within the 10th district. But it privileges self-funding candidates that I don't think we necessarily want to do, and it privileges an extreme political movement to both sides because that's where the highly ideological resources come from. So there's always going to be a loophole, but campaign finance is protected speech, and it's just a very difficult issue.
I gotta keep cutting you off. All right, Stephen Shaw, your chance at the campaign finance question.
Sure. So to answer the question directly, it's no, no, and no. We've been blessed in this campaign to be supported by all kinds of people all over the place, and we've raised tremendous amounts of funds for this campaign. And the realistic situation is that the 10th district is one of the most expensive congressional races in the country. Last time, roughly $10 million was spent in this district. So whoever comes out of this Republican primary is going to have to raise significant amount of money to challenge Congressman Brad Schneider. His last report totaled something like $1.6 or $1.7 million that he has cash on hand from other interests. And so it's important for somebody that can raise money to be competitive and to be viable. And I think that what I've demonstrated thus far is that above and beyond just the people that we would normally look to in the circles that we have, I've brought new people into the fold, and I think that's going to be a net benefit for November.
Okay, thank you. I got a new question, I think, for Jeremy Wines. Okay, should we re-examine the Electoral College and the process of presidential elections?
No, we shouldn't. When in doubt, lean on the eternal wisdom of the Founding Fathers. So no, I don't think that we need to re-examine the Electoral College system. There are going to be situations, especially in a time like this, where our country is extremely divided, where you are going to have anomalies between the Electoral College and the popular vote. I think that was understood at the time. I think that's a part of our system, and I think it was designed in a way to give smaller states a voice that they necessarily wouldn't have if you were to move to a pure democracy type of system where it's all about the popular vote. So, no, I think we have other problems that we can address, good government issues, things we can do to make government work better for all of us. But I do not take amending the Constitution lightly, and I would not support upending the Electoral College.
Thank you. Sappenshaw?
Sure. I also think we don't need to change that system. And what I would say, though, is that the question sort of, I think, supposes a frustration that a lot of the public have with how things are going right now. And I look macro level. I was talking to Howard before about what I think is going to change the trajectory of the country. And I think the trajectory of our politics change when we change the people that we send to Washington. So when we send everyday Americans, when we send people that are not career politicians, when we send people that are not entrenched, I think we get a different result. And our founders always thought that we were going to have citizen legislators. And so I would submit that a big trajectory change for us would be with term limits. And the second trajectory change would be with the innovation of fair maps. If we have term limits and we have fair maps, I believe that we have a deep, deep bench across every district in this country. And I respect my opponents, I respect other people in the district. I feel like we can have a vibrant dialogue in each district and send more people there that have real-world experience, that are going to use common sense to approach things, and then they're going to get out of the way. And I think that's a far better place for us to emphasize than changing the Electoral College.
Thank you. But your turn.
Once again, we're going to have an agreement on this. The Electoral College is an important fraud protection where we all know that in order to cheat, you have to cheat in a bunch of states now instead of running up the total in one area or another. The Electoral College means that you have to win across vastly different parts of the country and have broad support, not deep support in one little community. So I think that's very important. I would like to take 1 second to talk about the finance reform for a second, and I'm just going to go 15 seconds. One of the things that happened with the campaign finance reform, unintended consequences, is these outside groups were not allowed to be positive about any candidate, but they were allowed to be negative about other candidates. And if you look at some of the nasty and negative campaigning that goes on, that is a direct outgrowth of our banning support for one candidate, but allowing negative attack ads against others. So part of that unintended consequences was that. And when people talk about term limits, they're back to talking about modifying the Constitution because they feel like it or they're upset with something or other. Look, this district has been brutal about term limits. Right now, it's one. You get one, and then we're done with you, and that's been for this entire map. So I think that's solving a problem we don't even have, when there are real problems that we do have in Washington, in here, that we ought to be looking for.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm not even in this district, and I know that. All right. Now,
We're nicer
number
to other
7.
candidates. We're nicer to non-congressional candidates.
Well, it seems like this 10 just, flip-flop, 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 and then spending all that money. Okay, number 7 here is going first to Sappenshaw. What do you think about Trump pulling funding for the Great Lakes restoration?
You know, obviously, it's the Lake Michigan and our Lake Forest Preserve System are key natural resources for us, and so anybody that's elected to this office needs to protect the interests of our region on this issue. So we need to make sure long-term that Lake Michigan is safe for drinking water. We need to make sure that our parks and our green areas are maintained. So I would support anything that supports that, and I would oppose any cutting.
Thank you. Doug Bennett?
People who go to Congress have to make decisions about priorities, and that's one of the most important things. And a lot of times, it's not about whether you do or don't do something, it's how much do you do, how much do you spend on infrastructure, how much do you spend in different areas. And it's really hard to do any kind of budgeting if you're not allowed to look at what you've done before and make changes to those numbers because you're cutting something or other. Now, I love this area, and I think we have a great lake system, and I like the Fox River and all the things that we do here, but we have to bring everything to the table if we're going to balance our budget, and that means a few dollars less for Lake Michigan, that may be part of the price. If it means a few dollars less for roads or whatever we're going to choose. So when somebody goes, oh, we're going to bring the budget in line, we're going to be very careful about the way we fund money, but on every specific issue I'm going to increase funding for it, I think what you get is a runaway budget, and that's part of the problem we're seeing in Washington, is that every little thing that they do is worthy, And yet overall, we're spending more than we're taking in, and that's part of the problem. And unless we start saying, what do we have available to us, and forget what we did last year because we spent more than we had, what do we have this year to spend, and how do we allocate it? We can't move forward, and the question kind of presupposes is that we have more money than we had last year, we have more resources than we really do. And I think we need to really be good about what do we have, and where should we spend it, and how much does each valid resource get from the government.
Thank you. Jeremy Wines.
So serving as a member of Congress, I think you got to look at three things. You got to look at, you got to bring to the table your own independent judgment about different policies and different issues that you're going to be presented with. You got to bring to the table the needs of your district. It's representative democracy, so you've got to understand what is good for the area you represent, and you got to consider the national good as a whole. I think on all of these, for all of these reasons, I would be a fighter for the Great Lakes as a member of Congress, and do it from a position of influence. I think one of the problems that we have now, one of the reasons why I'm running, is to restore leadership to this congressional district. I'd like to be somebody who is at the table, who is speaking to leadership now, and advocating for my community, and pushing back where appropriate. There's things that happen in Washington I think are good, that I would want to go and support, but there's things that I would want to do differently, and I would do it from the perspective of somebody with a little bit of influence in Washington, rather than somebody on the back bench issuing press releases. So I would support, I would oppose the funding cuts to the Great Lakes. And there's other local issues that we need to be looking at and have a leader in Washington to address, including the issues in Zion with spent nuclear fuel that's been sitting there for 20, 30 years. And nobody in Washington, because of pure political opposition, has been able to get it moved out of here, so it's not affecting our communities. So a lot of local issues that we need a leader in Washington to be able to address. So.
Thank you. I think
it's done.
are we done with this one? I forget.
Yeah.
I got so many questions here.
Yep,
I'm telling you.
Everybody get to speak. We're on it.
We're on it. Oh, you're on it. Good. All right. So
Well, no, I think we're all on it.
you all went, didn't you?
Yeah, we did.
Okay. All right. I hate to be so incompetent here. All right. Now, you know it's your turn, but you don't know what the question is. All right. I'm going to jump from local to international because your job is a big one here. And I got two questions here that are kind of narrow, but I want you to combine them. What actions can Congress take to promote peaceful resolution with North Korea? And should the U.S. pull back troops from overseas? So I basically want to know what your international policy is on this kind of thing, these questions.
That is a good question. I would start by saying that a lot of foreign policy initiatives come out of the president's office because that's the role of the president. And Congress is much more supportive, and particularly the House, which has no ability to affect treaties. I think that we need to keep the pressure on North Korea, but we have to be very careful, and we need to bring in our strategic allies in the area and some of our strategic enemies, perhaps, like China, because the last time we ended up going in to North Korea, it ended up in a shooting war. I like the current administration's foreign policy a lot better than the prior administration. I think that it's been very aggressive about hunting down terrorists overseas. I think it's been very aggressive at trying to get rid of some of these problem actors in the world. I think we should start trying to see places where we can withdraw from some of those places that maybe they're not so dangerous anymore, but we have to be careful when we do that. So,
Fine, thank you. Jeremy Wines.
All right, North Korea in 1 minute and a half, go. So I think the interesting thing about my campaign is that I've been a leader in international affairs for 10 years. It's the reason why I've been endorsed by former UN Ambassador John Bolton, which means a lot to me. So on North Korea, here's the four things that I would want to focus on. First of all, I think we need to re-emphasize the importance of reunification of the Korean Peninsula under South Korean leadership, which would mean that the Kim regime in North Korea is over. It's going to topple eventually. I think anything that we can do to speed it along is a good thing. And the best way to do that is the way that we led against Iran prior to 2016, which is a sanctions policy that basically brings the regime to its knees, that makes it clear to international other countries and international business that if they deal with the North Koreans, they're not going to deal with the United States. Thirdly, I think we need to focus as North Korea continues to get involved with these kind of provocations and launching ballistic missiles. We need to consider overt and covert acts to prevent that, and I think we need to seriously consider ramping up our missile defense to make it clear to the North Koreans that the Korean Peninsula will be a no-fly area for the ballistic missiles. And then finally, I think it's good news if the North Korean regime considers that we're serious and that the last thing, there is a credible military threat on the table to prevent them from going fully nuclear.
Thank you. Next time, your turn.
Thank you. I support also maximum pressure sanctions approach to North Korea. I think that we have to be in concert with our allies in South Korea and Japan. I think we've got to work closely with China as well. But I think having a very, very strong sanctions program there, being as maximal as possible on pressure is critical because we don't really know who we're dealing with over there. He is a volatile person, and so I think sort of squeezing them as hard as we can would be a great initial step there. In particular, on the second part of your question, which was related to troop deployment internationally, it's too general a question. I mean, we have to look at individual issues very, very well, and we have to look at individual parts of the world very, very closely, and what's going to improve things for us in one area might not improve things for us in a different area. And so there's not a one-size-fits-all across all the places where we may have troops deployed right now, but there are experts that are guiding us and advising us, and we have to take their input into account. In particular, though, new engagements for Americans, I think we should take very reluctantly. We should be careful about those things and really identify places where our national security interests are either threatened or concerned before we commit to those things.
Thank you. All right, next question, number 9, goes to Doug. No, wait, am I wrong? No, it goes to Jeremy. Oh, I got my little grid here, and I'm combining two now. These are two interesting ones, too. How would you promote bipartisan dialogue and compromise, and can you represent this district and stand up to your party leaders?
Great question. So I've done it. I have actually worked in a bipartisan policymaking environment for the majority of my professional career. I worked in the Midwest office of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, a membership organization that some of you may even be members of. And our philosophy is a philosophy that I would bring to the table as a member of Congress, is that good legislation includes support from both Democrats and Republicans, that too much in this country is done one party versus the other, and ping-pong balls going back and forth on different issues, depending on who's in the majority. So I actually have a history of working in a bipartisan fashion to get things done that are important to thousands of folks here in the 10th District. I think I fit the mold of members of Congress who have provided leadership in the 10th District for 40 years now. Somebody who is fiscally conservative, who's focused on pocketbook issues, making it easier for small businesses and large businesses to get ahead and to grow here in the 10th District, making it easier for middle-class taxpayers here to get ahead as well. And also socially moderate. So I think when you combine those two things, that's what this district has come to expect out of their congressional leadership. And I think I'm the one candidate on this stage that has a history of working in a bipartisan environment in Washington, D.C., and actually getting something done. And these were not simple things. Sanctions on Iran was not an easy thing to do in a partisan environment, but I was able to show leadership on it across the Midwest. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm distinctly not a politician, but I am a businessman. And in business, we solve problems. And I think that's the approach that I would have going into government. And you solve problems by working with everybody that's there. And I think the expectation of the American people is that whoever goes there is going to work together. And it sounds a little bit idealistic, but I think it's precisely how we should act when we get there. In particular, somebody like me that's not worried about being a career politician, not worried about being there for 10 or 20 years, is not worried about towing the party line the way that somebody that is looking at that next election, worried about that next primary is going to be. And so in my background, I've started my own business, I've grown that, there's problems that come up all the time. There's new businesses that I've invested in, there's problems that come up all the time. You work with your entire team that's there. And we can't have sort of boundaries as it relates to party when we get there. The expectation is that everybody's going to work together, and I'm going to do the same. And I think somebody that champions term limits, somebody that's going to be there for the short term, they'll be able to withstand the kind of partisan bickering that happens behind the scenes.
Thank you. Doug Bennett.
I've worked at a lot of places, and what I've seen is a lot of stakeholders who have separate interests. And navigating those interests isn't about compromising everything. It's not about we're all here holding hands together. It's about realizing that different people have different values and their interests are valid. And what we want to do is make sure that we have negotiations and discussions between the different groups where we can do basically something that says, look, these are my top 2 issues, those are your top issue. What can we do that we get what we feel we need here in the 10th or what we need wherever we are, and what do you need? It's not a matter of fighting your own leadership, it's a matter of focusing on what's important to you and your constituents, but allowing an understanding that there are things that are not as important to you that other people who've come to Congress need. And one of the things I think is lost is that, and it's very strange because when you do this and run for Congress, one of the things you learn is that the people on the other side who are doing the same thing you do, you have an affinity for them because they're doing the same thing. They're going door to door, they're knocking, they're talking to people. And it's surprising to me that the relationships in Washington have grown so poisonous as they have such a commonality of what they have to do. And we've lost respect for people who disagree with us but have gone through the same trail and represent a group of people to the best of their abilities who aren't necessarily quite the same as we are. And I wish that we were more open to understanding that people who live in different districts do have different priorities and those are valid and that we should treat them with respect. And I think that's been lost.
Thank you. All right, now you all got a chance at that, didn't you? Yeah, that started with you. All right, now, number 10. This is my next question. Where did I put that? Okay. Goes to Shaw, Sapp and Shaw. I've got a couple here. I'm trying to combine them, and I'm looking at the time, and that's what the problem is. So I think this needs to be asked. What should be done about health care reform? And a corollary to this is, will you support funding to increase mental health care? There's also a question here about food stamp program, which I think all of that is related. So go there.
Okay. Just to finish up the answer, when we were talking about Medicare and Medicaid, Doug, I'm looking at these things as improving the system now before we talk about entitlement reform, not in lieu of entitlement reform. And I think in healthcare reforms in particular, these are the things that we can do today to get more value out of the healthcare dollar that we're spending. Just as an example, last year we spent $22 billion on imaging. If we compete imaging between outpatient centers and our health systems, we can save 70–80% on the cost of an MRI. Why wouldn't we want to do that? Let's catalyze our normal market-based forces so that we can get better results tomorrow. So I think those are things that we need to push forward on immediately. In terms of health reform generally, we have a lot of bureaucrats in Washington that don't fully understand the healthcare system. And so when they come at it from a place where they're not understanding where the dollars are spent. I had a conversation talking about different gaps and different exposures that Obamacare created. We can aptly point out those exposures, those gaps in the context that we haven't repealed or replaced it, and try to fix those things for everyday Americans, because they're the ones facing out-of-pocket costs that are going up, insurance premiums that are going up. And so I think having more business owners, having more people with healthcare background is necessarily going to improve that. Mental health is a super important issue and one that I'm very motivated on. I serve on the board of directors of a telehealth startup company called Regroup Therapy, and they're precisely directing mental health services to underserved areas. These are precisely the type of innovations that we want to create and nurture so that we can improve our communities and direct healthcare services where they're needed.
Thank you. Okay, Doug Bennett, your turn.
So,
You remember the combo question?
yeah, well, there's a bunch of it that was in there, and it was food stamps.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want you to talk a little bit about the big question is healthcare reform, but the corollary is mental health funding and food stamp program.
All right, so when we talk about, in the recent set of years, when we talk about healthcare reform, we're really talking about health insurance reform. It's not about how we provide care as much as how we pay for the care that we have. I think the federal government, through the law of unintended consequences, has made a system where it makes sense for people not to participate till they get sick. They have the wrong incentives, and what people do when they follow those incentives is we end up with a situation where costs could skyrocket. It was predicted when it passed. It's happening now. I get it. I don't think we're going to find places where we're going to get 70% savings or whatever that is. I think we're not as dumb as we look. We probably don't have like some things that cost 4 or 5 times as much as they really need to. It's just an observation from being in the business world. Like when you really dig into it, you find there's other things in there. So I think we really need to focus on this, and trying to solve 3 questions in 90 seconds is really hard. I do think that we are not good about mental health issues in this country. We're not good about end-of-life issues, and we need to think about how we're going to fund them and take care of people who have those issues, because we've kind of lost them in the shuffle of what we do, and we're going to not give any shrift to the food stamps question, which is coming along, which I'm sorry about. But I think that we really have to talk about what happens at the end of life, what happens for people who have sicknesses they never get better from, which really is a problem for Medicare and other things. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I looked away for a second. Okay. Yes, it all works out, right. Yes, I know.
Right,
Yes.
okay. So I think the place I'll start on this question is that we have to look at the process by which we go about doing this, and we've been doing it the wrong way. And so basically what happened in 2010, as you all remember, is that on a party line vote, Democrats passed the Affordable Care Act, no Republican support. So then eventually the pendulum of power swings and Republicans gain power, and they look to pass something without any bipartisan input, and that fails. And so we have to figure out, and I think we can do it in an incremental way, we have to figure out a way to address the problems that we have and stop, treating this like another one of those, ping pong balls that keeps going back and forth, and actually sit down, work with each other, and address the problem at hand. I think a couple things that we can do. I was supportive of the repeal of the individual mandate. I think it was a failure. I think it wasn't working as it was intended, and a tax credit policy instead would be more likely to get younger, healthier folks into the marketplace to ultimately keep those costs down. So I'd like to see some work on that, and I know there is some bipartisan talks in Washington as far as that goes. And then I do think we need to look at things outside of what Congress was trying to do back in 2017, which is dealing with tort reform, dealing with the marketplace, allowing insurers to sell plans across state lines. Anything that is pro-competition in the healthcare marketplace, I think, is a good thing. We need to look at opportunities to do that in a bipartisan way. So
Great,
that's how I would answer that.
All right. This is going to Doug Bennett. Question 11, first crack at this one. Have you taken Grover Norquist's pledge? Do you agree with the tax cuts and deficit?
No, I have not taken Grover Norquist's pledge. I hope I got his name right. But I do agree with reducing the rates that we did in this last go-round. I think that was important. There were things that I liked in that last tax cut. There are things that I was not as happy about, which is the state and local tax exemptions going away, which affects almost everybody in this room. I am concerned about deficits. I think we need to start with an understanding of how much money we have, and it would be really great that we could solve all the deficit problems in 60 seconds or less. But we really need to, I think that without talking about the main drivers of the deficit, which are the entitlements, which is Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, and defense, you're left with trying to balance the budget in a very thin sliver of what we have left to do. So unless we're going to be serious, and everybody has to do this because neither party can afford to come to this table and get hammered on talking about entitlements without the other party being there. So this is one of those places where the poisonous atmosphere in Washington hurts us the most, is our ability to get done anything that is remotely effective about bringing the deficit down. So I think we need to start having good conversations about it, honest conversations, and an analysis that we're not going to spend as much money in the future perhaps as we do now, because because we're spending more than we have. And we know where that leads. That leads to Illinois. And we've seen what happens in Illinois if we do that for a long period of time, and we don't want that to happen in Washington.
Thank you. Jeremy?
No, I haven't signed Grover Norquist's pledge, nor would I. I am not in the business of signing pledges with Washington organizations, same as the term limit pledge. I'm not going to be signing those kind of pledges that are oftentimes totally ignored when somebody gets to Washington, D.C. So I was a big supporter of the tax cut bill, and here's a few reasons why. Most importantly, 80% of taxpayers in this district are going to see benefits from this bill, and I think we're starting to see the polling turn around on it now as people realize that certain folks were misinterpreting what this bill was about. The doubling of the standard deduction, so whereas 33% of folks were itemizing before, now fewer than 10% are going to even be incentivized to itemize because we've doubled the standard deduction. That's a big win. The basically doubling of the child tax credit. Leslie and I, we have 3 kids under the age of 8. So many families in this district do. They move to the suburbs to raise a family. That child tax credit is going to be a big help to working families all across the 10th Congressional District. Dropping the rates, making the rates more competitive for corporations that are competing globally. We have 15 or so Fortune 500 companies in this district, tons of small businesses, manufacturers that compete outside the United States. Making them more competitive is a big win. So I was a big proponent of this. It wasn't perfect. No bill, generational piece of legislation like this is, but on net, the vast majority, over 80% of taxpayers in this district are going to benefit. So I was a big supporter.
Okay. Sappenshaw, your turn.
Sure. I haven't signed any pledge, the Norquist pledge. I don't think that we should go into office thinking, we're not going to do one thing or absolutely going to do the other thing with respect to our fiscal policy. I'm heavily concerned about our national debt. It's $20 trillion. I'm heavily concerned about the interest we pay on that debt, roughly $25 billion a month. With current interest rates are probably going to go up. Overall, our policies have to look at how much we spend and how much we tax. And so people that are supporting, sort of no new taxes, and that is their mantra, their underlying frustration is that they feel like we don't rein in spending as a country. We don't rein in spending at the federal level, and I think that's where that frustration comes from. On the tax bill last year, as a small business owner and as somebody that has invested in businesses, it's an important thing that we did. It really is going to spur our regional economy. It's going to encourage small business owners to take more risks. It's going to encourage them to invest in an additional location. It's going to encourage them to invest in a new business. 50% of our jobs come from small business owners. And so some of the headwinds, in addition to what Jeremy said, some of the headwinds that we pose to small business owners in the form of tax policy is important to overcome. That bill helped with those things.
Thank you. Okay, you guys, you're just looking at me going, what could possibly be coming next? And see, I have this, but I have figured it out now, so I'm going to relax. There's going to be 2 more questions, and then you're going to have your closing statements. And we dealt with the pledge. Now we're going to go to a combo, another combo. It's 3. And you men are going to address the women's issue. All right? And Doug, I think Douglas goes first. No, wait a minute. It's question 12. Jeremy goes first.
Okay.
All right. I'm combining them now. Are we good?
We're
All
good.
Right. So, on the piece of paper is how will you deal with sexual harassment and its effects. Another one says, what is your position about reproductive decisions? And another one is, do you support the Equal Rights Amendment? Will you vote for legislation passing it? I don't want you to talk too much about anyone. I want you to talk about women's rights in general and how you feel about these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been a lot of negatives in our politics the last couple of years. I think one of the positives to come out of it has been a renewed focus on women's rights issues, on issues of sexual harassment in the workplace, the Me Too movement. These are all positives, and I'm glad that these issues are coming to the fore. So, as I mentioned earlier, I consider myself a socially moderate individual. So I'll tell you what I mean by that. So I would always vote to protect a woman's right to choose, and that's very important to me. And so you would have a voice in Washington that would protect those rights. And in the same token, supportive of the rights of members of the LGBT community to marry. I'm a supporter of equal rights when it comes to marriage and folks deciding who they love and who they want to spend their lives with. So these are important issues, and philosophically, these are all of those issues would have a supporter in Congress should I be elected by the people of this district. So.
That was a good answer. Okay, now, Sappenshaw, I'm sure you can do a good job, too.
Sure. My general temperament is very intuitive to me, just based on my experience. How would I want my wife to be treated? How would I want my sister to be treated? How would I want my mother to be treated? All three extremely strong women. My mother, master's degree in mathematics, CPA, started her own accounting firm. My sister is an OBGYN with a maternal fetal medicine subspecialty. She's active in practice. She's a surgeon. My wife is an allergy immunology specialist in her own private practice. How would I want them to be treated? That's how I would want all women to be treated. On the issue of abortion, as a physician, I support a woman's right to choose. I think it's between her and her physician. I'll just give you a couple of details about just growing up and what happened when I was going to graduate school. When I was in law school, I did a combined law and medical degree. When I was in law school, for the first time in this country, 50% of matriculations in law schools nationally were women. It happened just 16 or 17 years ago, 15 years ago. And then a few years later in medical school, I was on the admissions committee at Case Western, and the same thing happened for medical school. So professionally, my generation has grown up with 50% women. 50% of the intellectual capacity that we have out there is in women. So we need to protect them in the workplace, at home, and otherwise. It's just utterly intuitive.
Thank you. That's a good answer, too. All right. Okay, Douglas Bennett, your turn.
All right. I did not grow up with 50% of the people being women. My mother was one of the first people who had to go out and work. It turns out I was a very early latchkey kid, because I grew up in the 70s, and it was a very different time. And I've seen a lot of changes, and most of them are tremendous, and I love them. I can't stand people who prey upon the helpless and the powerless and victimized people. So as far as the harassment goes, the people who are predators, we have to go find them, and we have to get rid of them. We have to, if they've broken the law, they should pay for that. I do want to remember that people do have the rights of all accused in this country, which is the right of presumption of innocence. So I want to make sure that they have due process, but I think we should be very aggressive about that. And that's a very important issue for me. Wow, 30 seconds. All right, sorry, we'll move on. I am pro-life, I'll tell that. That's who I am. I believe that the Congress can only do what it's supposed to do, that the Supreme Court owns the decisions on gun control, campaign finance reform, abortion, and gay marriage, and there's nothing a congressman can do pragmatically that will contravene those congressional protections. And I will not support any legislation on any of those issues that would be overturned the next day.
Boy, guys, that was really good, because I gave you such a crazy thing. All right, I think this is a good wrap-up question. So this is going to be the, number 13? Am I up to 13, 12? Yeah, 13. I don't know, lucky 13 here. What could it be? And, Sappenshaw goes first. Okay, what can be done? Oh, that's not the right one. Here it is. What are the 3 most important issues facing our district? What would you do?
So I think everybody sort of has a different view of kind of what are the priority items, and the priority items are important. Prioritization is part of the problem in our current day. But I look at it and I think of what people are telling me. What are they saying are the big issues that they're facing? And that's part of why I've been running, is because of healthcare costs. Healthcare costs are eating up a lot of people's wage increases over the last 15 or 20 years. We talked about out-of-pocket costs going up, insurance premiums going up. That's a big issue for the vast majority of people in our district. I think generally also the idea of opportunity, the idea of the opportunity to grow, to use your own energy and efforts to improve your family's position, to improve your financial position, the ability to start a business. Those are the things that I hear a lot. And we want to keep that basic sort of promise of America going, where if you work your butt off, you do as hard as you can, you're sincere and you have integrity, that you can grow and develop. And so I look at the last year's, both in terms of the tax bill and the ongoing work that we need to do to improve small business investment. And I would say that small business growth, small business investment, the opportunity to rise up, along with healthcare costs, are the big priority items.
Thank you. All right, Douglas Bennett.
So we're talking about the things that matter to the people in our district, and I would tell you things that I've heard or that have resonated with the people I talk to. I go around and I talk about runaway college tuitions, because that's a federal issue, and I think everybody I talk to nods. I've put one child through college. I'll tell you that it costs a small house to do that. When I went to Northwestern, it cost a decent car. These are out of control, and part of the problem is the federal government funding of higher education is the problem. So we need to reset the incentives. There's things we can do, but that's more than the 60 seconds we have left. The second thing is, I think that we've messed up our health insurance marketplace in a terrible way. We need to really look at new ideas on how to fix it. We're not going to have some magic silver bullets that come through, but we need to have things that work that we might be able to take in from other insurance marketplaces and graft them into the health insurance marketplace that will move us forward on that. I mean, the state problem, of course, is the exodus of people because of the hostile environment on taxes, and that is something that is somewhat beyond our control at the federal level, but it is on everybody's minds that the tax policies here have led to a decimation of our tax base, with people leaving every 5 minutes, and I think anything we can do to help Illinois mitigate the damage in Springfield has to be looked at.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I want to address this and try to touch on a couple local issues that we haven't touched on that aren't that don't apply all across the country. So first of all, an issue that I mentioned briefly, which is the issue of spent nuclear fuel sitting up in Zion. I think this is a peculiarly local issue that we need to address, and we need to actually have leaders in Washington that can't just focus on funding, which is important, which Zion needs to offset that cost, but can actually be a leader in Washington to finally get that fuel removed so Zion can begin to move forward as a community. So that's one particularly local issue. Another one that's hugely important, especially here in Lake County, is the opiate epidemic that's tearing apart communities all across the 10th District, all across Lake County. We need to address this issue. It's going to take real funding from Washington. It's going to take looking at HIPAA reforms so parents know when a child is overdosed. It's going to look at, we're going to need to take into account prescription drug policies so we can prevent doc shopping, and we're going to need to address the source of the drugs actually getting here from cartels in Mexico. So we need to take a serious look at the opiate epidemic. It's a big problem here. Finally, this is another area where I sort of see differently than my own political party at the moment, is free trade. We are a manufacturing district. $7 billion worth of goods move out of this district, move across the country, move across the world. We need a voice in Washington for new, better trade deals. It's actually going to preserve that consensus that has been bipartisan in this country, that free trade is a benefit to our districts. Thank you.
All right. Yes. Okay, I think it's been fair. I let each of you run over a little bit. There's some that offended more than others, but anyway. Okay, now we're going to go in reverse order for your final closing statement. You have a minute and a half, and that means we're going to start with Mr. Bennett and go back down the table that way. Right. Okey doke.
Okay. I'd like to thank you all for coming here and the League of Women Voters for all the work they do to put this on. It's a great event, and I'm glad that you guys got the chance to know more about us, and hopefully we've answered most of your questions. If not, I'm sure we'll be around to answer more. I've walked over this whole district. It's been a great experience for me, talking to people, learning from them, and I'm here to ask for your help, your support, and your vote to make changes in Washington. I think I have a unique set of skills that are very different. I'm not a lawyer. Wow, sorry. And I think we can make, I am idealistic. I do believe we can make changes. I do believe that if you have innovative ideas and you understand how to work with people, you can get stuff done. And I think that my views are reflective of the district. I think I can help you get what you need done. And I'm willing to fight for you. I live here. I'm going to come back here when it's done. This is my home, and this is why I do this. I do this because I want to come back to Lake County. I wanted to have this place. I'm not interested in being in Washington. I know I have to get on a plane to go do this, but I'm here to represent you. And a representative has to share your values, speak with your voice, and have your back. And here's what I promise you. I will always listen to what you have to say. I will tell you straight what I believe, whether you like it or not. I'll tell you why. And I'll go fight for you every day as hard as I possibly can. Thank you for inviting me to your event.
Thank you.
Oh, reverse order.
Is it?
Right, yes, it's you. We're just going to, yeah.
Go back up the line.
So thanks for sticking with us all this way. I think the crowd thinned a little bit and got tired of us. I'm running because I want to give back to the country that's given our family so much. And I hope more of you do the same. I hope more people in general step up to do the same. I'm not going to be a career politician. I've taken the term limits pledges we discussed and we've sort of disagreed on. I will serve no more than 6 years, and then I'm going to come back home. I have a wonderful life. I'd like to get back to it, certainly. But I have a simple offer for you. Somebody that has real-world experience, business owner, physician, entrepreneur. I'm going to bring that experience for a delineated period of time and then go back home. I'm going to support a non-divisive politics, a pragmatic politics, one where incremental improvement, incremental change is still worth pursuing. And I'm going to do that for our period of time representing, first and foremost, the interests of the 10th District. The 10th District's been an independent district, independent-minded place. It's been a place where if there was bipartisanship, it lived here. And so we can be an example for the whole country if we bring pragmatic leadership from here, that once we get elected, we're looking to work in the best interest of the 10th District and the country, not just in terms of the party. And so that's what you can expect from me. I humbly request your vote for March 20th.
Thank you. Jeremy?
So again, thank you all very much for being here. So I think the theme of this, and I think the reason why a lot of you are here, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or an independent, is that Washington is a mess. It's broken, and I'm running because I don't think that things will look any different with the same people running for the same office, saying the same things year after year. I think we need a new generation of independent leadership in this country to step up and step forward, and that's why I'm running. And I think all of you, whatever your party affiliation, deserve effective representation in Washington based on shared values. You need somebody there who won't just follow the leader, but who actually has the capability to lead themselves. And so I think there's three things why I think I'm the best nominee to carry forward the Republican banner in November. I have a history of accomplishments, getting things done in the policy community. I've served this community. I've been involved in this community for 10 years, getting these things done in partnership with Democrats and Republicans all across the 10th District. And I'm a fiscally conservative, socially moderate leader like this district has represented for a number of years. And I'm the only candidate that meets all of those three criteria. That's why I've been endorsed by the Times as the only candidate that can effectively take on Brad Schneider. Been endorsed by great local township organizations because they know me, they know what I've gotten done, and they know what I would bring to the table as a leader in Washington for all of you. So thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to speaking afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. This is good. Exercise your right and vote. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You got it. Yes, sir.